And welcome back to Capitol Tonight. 100 years ago this month, New York suffered two horrific fires within a 4-day span. Tomorrow marks the 100th anniversary of the fire that engulfed the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory in New York City, becoming the deadliest industrial disaster in state history. 146 garment workers, most of them immigrant women ages 16 to 23, either perished in the flames or they jumped to their deaths. And then 4 days later, during the early morning hours of March 29, 1911, a fire broke out at the state capitol, claiming the life of just one lone night watchman. But the inferno then destroyed thousands of historical artifacts and many of the documents that were housed in the state library, which was at the time the 5th largest library in the nation. Now, earlier this week, the State Museum opened an exhibition on the 1911 Capitol fire, and a ceremony will be held on the 29th to mark the 100th anniversary. Both fires had long-term impacts on the course of state history. My next guests are here to discuss their significance. Bob Weibel is the state historian and the chief curator of the New York State Museum. And then next to him we have Christine Ward. She's the state archivist. And then across the table, Brian O'Shaughnessy is the co-director of the Labor Religion Coalition. I want to thank you very much, all of you, for joining me. Thanks very much.
Good to be here.
So I'd like to start, I think, with the Triangle Fire, because it's the commemoration is coming. And Bob, if you'd like to tell us about it, because it's tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken.
It is definitely tomorrow. And we will be meeting at the Clark Auditorium in the State Museum at 4 o'clock. It's a free event, and we will be having a couple speakers who are knowledgeable about the fire and about some of the prominent players in the story, Frances Perkins in particular. And we'll be doing a ceremony by which we recognize all of the victims, and we will wrap it up, and we will conclude the fast that some people, Brian in particular, and others have been on for several hours now, and 40 hours is tomorrow.
That's right.
So I know you're looking forward to this.
Yeah, 40 hours is a lot. Why is it that you are doing that?
The fasting is really to bring public attention to a moral issue. This is not a private fast. It does have a spiritual dimension to it, but it's really about saying workers are really important, and linking it to the Triangle Fire, where they were unimportant, is the link that we're making this year. So 40-hour work week, I consider a great value. That's something we want to protect in this country, and we're losing it. And it links to the number 40 in the scriptures, which is used about 20 times to convey a period of trial and then a time of blessing.
You know, what's interesting also is this is unusually pertinent moment to talk about workers and workers' rights when you're seeing at states all across the nation, unions are under fire, unionized workers are under fire, and this particular fire, an actual one, had an impact that really sparked, I should stop this, a labor movement, and had a long-term effect that we're still seeing today, correct?
Oh, right. It's an enormously significant moment in not just New York State labor history, but American labor history. As a result of the Triangle Fire. The fire is significant for two reasons, really. One is just a horrific event. People can easily envision people burning in buildings or jumping off of buildings, especially if they're young teenage women. Horrible thing. But its lasting impact is its legacy. As a result of the fire, the factory, the investigating committee was formed by Al Smith and Senator Robert Wagner with Frances Perkins, who later became Secretary of Labor. The committee went around the state, interviewed factory workers everywhere, looked into factory conditions and found just how awful they were, and passed a whole array of labor laws to provide better worker safety, dealing with child labor, women's labor, and even reorganized the Labor Department to enforce those labor laws.
And actually that report, Christine, to bring you into this, you have that, do you not?
We actually have the records of the Factory Investigating Commission in the state archives, and so there you can see photographs that were taken in the field of the conditions in factories. And this is not just in New York City, but these were factories all over New York State. So they went in and looked at the Endicott Johnson shoe factory down in Endicott near Binghamton. They looked at all kinds of factories that produced textiles, but also that produced shoes and garments and just about everything all around the state.
The reason why it's notable is that's just one tiny piece of what the archives actually contain.
It is.
But it would have been considerably larger had it not been from the fire that ravaged the Capitol back in 1911. Is that correct?
Out of all of the stuff that the archives has, yes.
Right.
Yes. The Capitol fire, which happened just a few days after the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, burned the northwest section, the top 2 floors, the 3rd and the 4th floor of the state capitol, and did such incredible damage to the New York State Library, which was housed there at the time, as well as a number of materials that were also in the New York State Museum. It was considered to have been really the worst library disaster in modern times. And they lost at the time over 600,000 books, which was a huge collection in those days. Their entire card catalog, which was the way they accessed all of the materials there. And they lost almost all of the colonial and early statehood records from New York State. So
this brings us sort of to modern day, because we don't know necessarily what we don't know because we don't have those records. There's a lasting impact from that fire. And then, Brian, from the Shirtwaist fire, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, there's still an impact today that it's still an issue in terms of workers' rights, in terms of sweatshops. I mean, this isn't necessarily something that it has gone away, unfortunately.
No, it hasn't gone away. The Association of Fire Protection Association has in its current issue a picture of the Triangle Fire on the front page. Right next to it, a picture of a fire in Bangladesh. And the same, almost the exact same thing happened. They were so struck by the parallels, they put it right on the front page. Women jumping, in this case, from the 11th floor to their death. So garment factories are still sweatshop. That is the norm, unfortunately, outside the United States. There are indeed some sweatshops in the United States. We fortunately have a good Department of Labor in this state that does its best to close them down. But it is the norm. And there is a way, though, for New York State to take the lead in just as it did after the Triangle Fire, and that's through its leadership in what's called the Sweat-Free Purchasing Consortium. This is a consortium that has 3 states involved right now, joined, and 10 cities. If we can get a critical mass, then we can give the business, the garment business, the apparel business, to the factories, to the businesses that step up and say, I will meet this code of conduct for the workers and the environment. I will step up, but I need the business. In other words, if I'm way down here, what we call the road to the bottom, then you can't be competitive. So we need the state to stand up and lead to end sweatshop, to end taxpayer use.
Now, you know,
of product.
Brian mentions that we have a good Labor Department. Bob, do you think that we would have what we have today in terms of the labor enforcement, in terms of unions, in terms of anything that we have, had we not had Triangle?
Oh, probably some version of it, because the way the forces of history were moving, the Industrial Revolution had really was at a high point. Immigration was growing. The progressive movement was in force, and it would have picked up elsewhere. But it's not surprising to me that New York was the place in which all of this blossomed. New York has a great progressive tradition, and New York's a leader. And it's a leader certainly in labor legislation and labor law, and this ultimately led to the New Deal.
And similarly, in terms of modern day, I mean, you would not have the state library and a wholly separate entity away from the Capitol had this not occurred.
Well, you know, the very interesting thing was that the state library was about to move into brand new quarters in the state education building right across the street within the next several months. And had this fire not occurred, they would have moved everything over there and all would have been fine. What happened then was that they had to rebuild from scratch because they lost just about everything. And the legacy that we see from this today, we see it all the time in the archives because most of the records that were saved were severely damaged by fire. And we spend a great deal of time actually trying to retrieve information from those records so that people can use them.
So you have to conserve them, you're conserving them in a different
Yes.
way. I actually know a little bit more about Triangle than I do about the Capitol, which is kind of strange since I've covered it for 10 years or so. But how did it start?
Well, it began in the Assembly Library in the northwest corner, and I don't think anyone really knows exactly what happened, but they believe it was faulty electrical wiring.
And it really was, I mean, we're looking at some photos here. I mean, it was a conflagration. It was not a small situation. And nor was the Triangle Fire, which, again, I mean, there were doors that were locked, and people could not get out because they had to jump, and it was really a horrific situation. So, again, just if we would remind everyone of the dates of the commemoration. So tomorrow,
Tomorrow, 4 o'clock, the Clark Auditorium in the New York State Museum. Everyone is welcome.
Free event.
Free
Yep,
event,
free.
that's right. And at the end of it, those of us who are fasting will break the fast with the breaking of the bread. It'll be there will be some food available.
very nice. And then the Capitol event.
Next Tuesday, March 29th, at 10 o'clock on the west steps of the Capitol. And there will be an unveiling of a plaque which will eventually go up to the northwest corner of the Capitol and be put in place later
Well,
on.
I want to thank you all for sharing this moment with us. It's a really fascinating moment in history, tragic, but also very interesting. So, Christine Ward, thank you. Bob Weigel, thank you very much. And Brian O'Shaughnessy, happy
Liz.
fasting
Thank
to
you.
you.
Thank you.